Welcome to the February 27th bhyve production user call. We have Andrew, Emil, Jan, Eva, Hans, Richard, and myself, Michael, so far, and I have spent some time this last week with illumos PCI Pass-Through, having seen such progress on FreeBSD. If I were to just yell something from the clock tower, it would be, hey, it would be great if the illumos loader had unset PPT devices, devs, because, well, either it's not documented or it doesn't work, and I got myself into a boot loop where I removed one device too many based on a blog post I read, and it would panic shortly after boot, and there's no way I could unset them. I think I may have toasted my pool such that importing it elsewhere and removing my entries from the loader.conf, I believe it was, didn't work. So, hey, if that's an option, that would be great, but I do very much want to see that working across the board. Actually, I think I have a machine next to me that I've had running for several days. It's just running Windows Pass-Through on an NVIDIA card, and I just treat it like a normal desktop. On that note, we had a bit of a discussion about how we work around the fact that your modern PC has typically one USB bus, and you better use it wisely. And if you're passing through, say, keyboard and mouse on a desktop, you suddenly lose administrative access to go run over and say, uh-oh, let me go type something like unset PPT devs, etc. But that's at boot time anyway. There are cases for having more than either one USB interface, etc., one for the host, one for the guest. And so I experimented with things like a NGFF, I believe they call it. It is a Wi-Fi card slot device to USB. My machine absolutely refused to boot with it in there, but in talking with a colleague, we will be exploring the HP Flex IO port, which is a little port in the back of the machine that can be like HDMI, display port, USB, it turns out. And Andrew, did you consider Bluetooth pass-through such that the resulting, I don't know, machine intended for desktop work or gaming, etc., has Bluetooth pass-through such that the user of, say, a Windows machine would be connecting via Bluetooth keyboard and mouse?
I have not. I don't particularly care for Bluetooth
Me neither,
keyboards and
but
mice.
okay.
Give me a wire or nothing.
Not disagreeing. So I'll give it a go if I can find a machine that identifies a Bluetooth device and just have at it. But going down that road, several GPUs have USB, either for VR interfaces or USB-C for high-speed connections built in. So that is not something I will be stocking up on, fancy GPUs with all that. But if one does have a GPU with USB seeing the D message or sorry, PCI conf and was it PRT something on illumos output would be nice, because that's potentially a nice discrete option, and being tied to the GPU, that's just nice and contained over there. I did have the somewhat disturbing thought of, in all this pass-through, I wonder if we could have a meaningful use of USB-C to HDMI video pass through by simply passing through the USB-C device. So that is disturbing. I see some comments flying. And then truly in the future would be Thunderbolt, which on FreeBSD, you plug in a Thunderbolt device, you do not even see acknowledgement of it. But I've heard talk of there being support for that. The comment is USB is required for full-featured Thunderbolt 3 and 4 support. Fair enough. So you might lose the USB-C along for the ride just to get it working. No worries. Okay. Any
So
questions on that, or
if you have a
suggestions or
GPU
wild
with
workarounds? Yes, Jan.
if you have a GPU with a USB-C port, it normally has its own USB controller for that.
Okay.
And that's quite nice for passing through, because then you can just put a hub in there and hook up your normal peripherals and use the conventional video output ports. But to get a full-featured Thunderbolt port, you often need some kind of combining cable where you take the display port and the like and run it through into a little breakout card where you get then combine it with USB, potentially, or PCI Express bandwidth. Yeah, it's messy, and Uh, I hope both Intel and AMD finally, with USB 4, understand that integrating this should be just table stakes and not a luxury feature anymore on a desktop. And just because it's a desktop, not a laptop, is not a reason to leave this little chip out and make it not work by default. But the big problem with the dedicated GPUs, if you have the USB and so on the board, you either need a little USB and other control information pass-through cable to plug into the main board from the GPU because it's not part of the normal PCI Express bus. Or you have to feed the video signal back into the main board to give it basically GPU video signal to
Hello.
the
Hello.
onboard board.
Cool.
It's annoying.
Okay, I thought today was the ZFS call.
No, that was yesterday. That's the later call. Welcome.
Oh no.
No worries. So, Alexei, we were just talking about various GPU pass-through and exploring getting access to perhaps a second USB port, such as through an interface plugged into a Wi-Fi slot. This particular card would not let my machine boot, but I have others on the way. And Alexei, good timing. Have you worked with any GPUs that have USB built in? I see that it's a thing.
No.
And I assume that's its own dedicated controller card. It's not like passed through in any magical way. And let's take a
And
look at this.
to make
It's
it
probably going to be
funnier,
shown as a separate PCI device just for USB, and that can be passed through separately, yeah.
I would hope so.
and sometimes you also see a separate PCI device for audio via DisplayPort or HDMI.
Oh, for audio too. Interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. And what I liked
Depends
about
on
this
the
post is
GPU
they
if it's
gave a listing
its
here.
own device or not.
Okay. Good to know. Thunderbolt. Let's see. There are no Thunderbolt ports. I'm guessing PSVR2 is a VR, virtual reality technology.
I assume it's PlayStation VR version 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry for being so late, by the way. Just
No
got
worries. There's no pressure, no pressure. May have audio too.
I was just making my I want to say this. I was just making my own website and I got so angry at CSS I decided to rewrite it in 90s HTML.
There you go. And yeah, that same conversation's been had about Linux this week on a few conversations. Anyway, off topic. So, Alexei, beyond your website, any news on your GPU pass-through utilities and ROM scrapers and other neat tricks?
Yeah, I was writing a website for that.
Oh,
just
okay,
to host
fine.
all there.
Okay, housekeeping. Anything
Yeah.
technological that affects the rest of us? Or you're just busy with that?
My phone should arrive tomorrow.
Which has a hypervisor. Okay, keep us posted. Okay, thank you.
Hypervisor phone.
Apparently there's KVM on Android devices. We look forward to your executive summary.
Yeah, on Tensor phones.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on like phones with Tensor
FYI,
CPUs.
Tensor CPU phones have a hypervisor. Or
Yep.
have hypervisor support.
Yeah,
Cool.
full KVM, and you can probably run some like Firecracker there.
Hmm.
If you can compile it.
Speaking of which, I saw this question on social media. Someone was looking for information on TSC in the support in the CPU and how Firecracker is implementing that. Jan, can you enlighten us maybe on the role of TSC and why in a virtualized environment? I think it was maybe for migration, but
So the TSC is a uptime counter register, and if it ticks at a CPU clock speed independent frequency and is synchronized across all CPU cores, it can be used to compute the wall time from an offset and the uptime. And it's about the fastest way to get the wall clock then, so that you don't have to go through power virtualized devices to get the clock, or have to have some magic page where the hypervisor very often, and there's at least on every context switch, writes in the overclock or something. Instead, you can just allow it to read that. The problem with using it is that the initial implementations were, because it was initially a performance counter to just count CPU cycles, were ticking at whatever frequency your CPU ran at. So when you had little load, it ticked slower when you throttled down and then throttled up again. And even when that was fixed, sometimes they weren't synchronized between multi-socket or potentially in just multi-core CPUs. So that, yeah, it's ticking at the same rate, but from the point you started that CPU core, basically, or that CPU socket,
Interesting.
which made them very annoying to use. That was fixed in hardware a year or two later then. And now it's usable, but in a virtualized environment, the problem is that if you add any form of live migration, you now have to synchronize those offsets or fix them up, and potentially you could have the systems running at different clock speeds, even if it's the same part. One could be configured to run at this frequency, the other at this in the BIOS, and then you would have total mayhem. But suddenly you'll see one virtual machine ticks 10% faster or slower or something. It just drifts faster than the NTP or whatever time synchronization client can keep up with. Those are, yeah, mostly theoretical issues until they aren't.
Okay. Does anyone else have thoughts, experiences there?
But
Success
yeah, if you have
stories?
the invariant TSC, it should work.
Cool. Mark L chimed in with an update to the tool he promised last week. So let's do a quick look. This is very FreeBSD-y. It is very sort of inside baseball on bug tracking, repairing, reporting, you name it. So his patch QA tool, which I can drop in chat, is designed to quickly smoke test patches to see if they apply and I believe build, such that if you're going through tickets with patches, you can have at least a, I don't know, lower hanging fruit perhaps. So let's take a quick look at this. MIT license, to do. So check the recording for his summary of what this does. It looks like he is not available to join today. No worries. And I am impressed that he was focusing on actual like statistics on what percentage of ports have meaningful applying patches, which ones do not, etc. So it looks like he's analysis, 90.2% coverage. And that decreases with older problem reports. No surprise. They no longer patch. And here's how to reach out to him. So I just want to get that on your collective radar as a follow-up to last week's calls. Thank you, Mark. Moving on, we touched on this a bit in the pregame call, but the FreeBSD 14.3 schedule is up. And let's take a quick look at that for those in FreeBSD land. And naturally, having things like Hans's wonderful TPM work land just before a release closes means it could be quite the wait until we actually get to see it, touch it, etc. So, 2020, okay. Code slush begins in April, and we are, so month and a half until things start getting kind of pre-finalized, and betas begin in May. So we have, let's just say, a month to see if there is any, gosh, truly low-hanging fruit items that can be cleanly implemented, tested, MFC'd, and get buy-in across the galaxy. From the pregame conversation, Hans found that Patrick did some CPU ID work in illumos, and that brought up the broader question of who is comparing the state of FreeBSD illumos and bhyve illumos, which would probably do for a a sort of audit of that and putting on various hats. If you're out there and you have a budget of some form, we have someone on hand ready to do that, and we are looking for funding. I have put some of that money out of my own pocket as recently as a week or two ago, and all are welcome to join. That goes for everyone on the call. That goes for everyone listening. Let's see. Is anyone following the glibc adventure? I saw email fly this morning relating to it. So that's still apparently not settled. Let's take a look if this is a ticket or there's a ticket. Okay, where did we end up? And was anyone here burned by this, where somehow Linux changed glibc and it broke on bhyve, which is
I don't
unexpected.
know if there's anything new on the issue, or basically on the underlying issue, but it was my understanding that bhyve reported an unusual cache topology which triggered an integer math error, which resulted in a ridiculous auto-tuning in glibc, which then just overflowed something else, and yeah.
The remaining issue, 1 TB L3 cache.
Yeah, well, exactly. It is 1 terabyte level 3 cache.
Goodness.
That's
Like,
what they computed.
misreported? Okay.
It's what
Clever.
Linux inferred from what bhyve told it.
Oh,
So yeah, and then it tried to tune for that, and then
oh, okay. Yeah, that's funny. Well, yeah, I guess we want to report accurately. So it's getting attention as recently as yesterday and today. So there's one to follow. If you haven't given Hans's TPM emulation support a try, let's give it a try, hoping it will hit 14.3. Thank you, Hans, once again. And after Santiago's big stink about all things pass-through being broken on high-end EPYC systems, the Foundation did a whole bunch of IOMMU work. I don't know to what degree that can be MFC'd from 15, but any and all testing is appreciated. Oh, look in the mirror, Michael, damn it. This came up in the Go ahead, please.
Is the microphone working?
It is. Welcome.
Finally. Good.
Yay.
So I have a couple of epics that we can use to test that. So is there a link to the test process that I can reference?
The test process is likely run 15 and pass through typically network interface cards, high end, which I trust you also have within reach. I guess following the original ticket that got us there would be good. So, I will maybe search on another screen for any mention of Santiago, because let's see, I don't want to jump around for our
the really annoying thing is that it can take days to reproduce, even under modest load.
Interesting.
Santiago had it running for 3 days before it happened again or something, under significant load and so on. So that's why it takes so long to verify. But the underlying problem is that bhyve had its own incomplete IOMMU driver for AMD. And yeah, now there's a proper one, which is part of the kernel and not part of just VMM inside of bhyve.
It was never clear that it was quite like a shim from day one that just got a few things done. And I found a link. I'll drop that in the chat in just a second.
And it worked for earlier, like Zen 1 and desktop CPUs mostly, but the bigger chips like second generation Zen and second generation EPYC and the like never really worked reliably. And now apparently it's finally been solved.
Okay, I've found the review, which hopefully links the problem reports that explain how we got there, but those are definitely in the docs of the bhyve call. So let's see. I'm going to search for MFC. That would be nice. MFC, no mention of that. I don't know if the review would be the place for that, but I thought it would say merge from current, meaning, hey, if it's in 15, let's get it into 14 something and hopefully get it in users' hands. Okay. Any and all testing is appreciated. Eva, awesome. Thank you. I will just try to spin up my Epic and poke at it. And now that I know something and we all collectively know something about GPU pass-through, well, let's just explore that. The OpenAT system call that came up in the context of Samba support on, say, non-Linux. I'll just leave that out there, and then perhaps a perfect segue while we have Emil. Could you kindly give us an update on your virtiofs work?
For sure.
Awesome.
So
welcome. Thank you.
So essentially things are going well. The main bottleneck is like time. I haven't really had time to work on it. There is a couple like bugs, but it's like I think I've identified them. Like so, it's just a matter of addressing the feedback that I got back in September and then making sure that everything works. The main problem, kind of longer term, is that there is really no good way of testing this apart from using this. So maybe like, anybody who wants to try to run it, like try to identify problems, that would really be helpful. Right now, things should be stable enough that you can copy large directories, you can do significant amount of work in there. I'm not sure exactly whether every single FS related, essentially whether some of the limitations that are there are due to virtuofs or due to Fuse itself. I've been using, for example, the Redis, essentially just cloning to test it, I've been cloning a Redis repo and then running the self-tests. That really stresses like a lot of the code paths in the VFS. Some of them are failing, and I'm not sure whether it's actually the fact we're using this is just Fuse or whether it's virtuofs itself. In general, yeah, this is mostly it. I'll be joining periodically to give updates as I'm fixing bugs. Hopefully, we have it ready for 14.3.
That would be cool. And are you familiar with PJD's, Pavel Davidek's NFS test suite?
The NFS test suite? Not really. Let's see.
He early on came up with a bunch of tools. I believe it was him. PJD NFS test. He imported ZFS to FreeBSD. He's done tons of file system work, and in the course of that, there is PJDFS test, a file system test suite. Here, I'll drop a link in shortly. That sure comes to mind when you are exercising something like virtiofs. So github.com/pjt/pjtfs test suite. It's loading slowly. Here we go. Come on, browser. Oh, well, there's a link in chat. I will drop it in here. So yeah, and full circle to what Eva and I have been looking at on, say, relatively common shareable benchmarks. We can say, hey, try these. That's our better than nothing common reference, and then make it more complicated from there. Note PJDFS test.
Thank you for the hint.
Oh, of course.
That should be really useful, for that.
Amen.
So yeah, all in all, yeah, it's file systems. They always, it's always kind of a mess. So especially this one particularly because since it's virtual, since we have the virtualization barrier, we cannot really spawn testing quickly. I essentially just have to spawn VMs on my desktop and then iterate on them. There is really no easy way of automated tests, I would say. Particularly because there is another complication that if we wanted to use just FreeBSD to test this, we would need both the host side and the guest side to be virtuofs aware. Right now, bhyve does not have a virtuofs emulation. So I have needed to use essentially Linux's virtuofsd. I think I mentioned it last time too. I don't think that's too much of an issue because from what I understand that in most most of the use cases we're looking for should be like running a FreeBSD guest on top of something else, right? So it's not really an issue. Like, and it's not a priority, like to have a bhyve FreeBSD, I assume.
Couldn't hurt, but it sounds like that's not been addressed at all.
So I would say that it would be very helpful, even for FreeBSD on FreeBSD virtualization, to use vidIOFS if it was supported, because it means that you can pass through directories or maybe full file systems instead of blocks.
Yeah.
I know that in theory we can do that via 9P, but 9P has a mismatch between the 9P protocol semantics from Plan 9 and what traditional Unix needs. And that manifests as a lot of problems with processes needing the 9P handles to behave like file descriptors and not like 9P handles. And that's a bit complicated. Like apparently the FreeBSD guest driver has still issues when processes drop privileges and so on, that maybe they effectively don't drop privileges in some cases, just because it still uses file handles it has cached.
And broadly having jails and VMs indistinguishable on FreeBSD is very, very cool.
Oh yeah,
long hope for that. Just the fact that same infrastructure, just put it as you please.
You could in general, get a lot less noise.
Like for sure. Like I think in general, like the just asking because it's kind of like a completely discrete work item, right? Like the driver and the bhyve emulation for that. Like it's not like the driver helps us too much in writing the bhyve emulation part. So I was wondering like whether it is worth the effort. But if it is, yeah, like it's definitely like on the to-do list. Another thing is that like one of the big advantages. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh yes, please. It's awesome. Thank you.
That another thing that is like important is, and I think one of the main advantages of virtIOFS is normally virtIOFS is able to directly share memory between host and guest, and the current virtIOFS driver does not do that. This was kind of like on purpose because again, like we need to make it stable and make sure everything works before adding these commands. They're not too complex to add. It's essentially a bunch of extra fuse commands that on top of the regular fuse protocol, but it is an additional thing, like to-do item. I think that if we make sure that everything is stable, like, and this gets merged, the next part would be like making it more efficient by adding direct reads and writes directly mapped to memory.
Well, you are a resident expert of the hour. Keep us posted, and thank you so much for your work.
For sure. No, glad to do it. Like I'll have to go, but I'll be joining like soon for another.
Super. Yeah. Thank you.
See everyone. Bye.
Thanks for working on that. Because it would be already very useful to have just the client to run FreeBSD on some common cloud platforms.
Bingo.
Which uses for shared directories.
Yep. So, Alex, are you still there? Yeah, you are. Let's revisit this ever so briefly. We have a small victory.
Yep.
This is a tool used for some of the conversion, and I politely opened an issue saying, hey, the do whatever the F you want license isn't like super adult in the room friendly. I forgot how I phrased it. And they're like, well, fine. What about like MIT or BSD? I'm like, yes, please. They last week re-licensed this code or dual license, I forget. I think that's it looks like, as 2-clause simplified BSD.
What was it before?
Do whatever the F you want license, which
I
wasn't intimately familiar with. And he's like, well, it's forever ago. We didn't really put much thought into it. I was like, that's cool. Yeah. So anyway, this tool among that list you may have just seen briefly on the GPU pass-through list suddenly means that those tools that Alexei has been grabbing a header from here and this or that from there and stringing together suddenly are predominantly BSD2 clause licensed. So that was a small victory. That said, Alexei, do you think, strictly from a legal perspective, be it licenses and the fact that retrieving vBIOS, etc., might upset vendors hypothetically, do you think there could hypothetically be a bhyve in-base tool for retrieving vBIOS and other firmware components needed for pass-through?
Actually, probably it won't upset vendors unless he redistributed them, especially modified
the results
vBIOSes.
that you... Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, just don't redistribute them.
Do not read this.
Maybe redistribute checksums of known good ones to authenticate what you found online.
Yeah. There's a website of a database of vBIOSes, so and it's like by a company, so maybe it's more or less like available, more or less not illegal. Like Tech Power Up, I think that's a company.
Tech Power Up, correct. But from a user's perspective, if one could have a flag do the right thing to grab what we need to launch this VM with the card pass-through, would be really, really nice, given how many acrobatics are needed to get GPU pass-through working on any platform out there. And FreeBSD, I'd argue, is in a pretty good position to make it easy. Well, what if we truly made it easy without having to muck with systemd and grub loader and all that? So, as your site formalizes, please revisit and let's just keep exploring how simple we can make it with these tools. You demonstrated some of these on recent calls, and I thank you for that because you've made it easy. Anything else on that topic, or keep doing what you're doing?
Yeah, EDK2 updates, of course. There's the node
You brought that up. Let's hop down there. Sure.
Yes.
Do tell. What do you find is missing from, say, that 2023 release we're working off of?
I don't know actually, but I've heard they patched in some pass-through stuff.
Okay, and we're talking specifically the bhyve EDK2.
Yeah, the bhyve EDK2 that's on the repos is the 2023. Not even the release, just one of the commits.
Oh, Rebecca, where are you? We miss you.
And yeah, a little thing. EDK2 uses OpenSSH. It has OpenSSH built in.
OpenSSH? Am I mishearing you?
Oh no, not OpenSSH. OpenSSL.
Okay. That's always a moving target.
Yeah, and I don't think we should leave like an older version of it.
Yeah, okay. That right there is a motivator. And just point for those not familiar with it, whenever there's a FreeBSD release delayed, it's like, oh, is it OpenSSL again? Yeah, probably. Okay, that's good to know.
So 2023, that's like
in a minute.
Yeah, 2 years of no OpenSSL updates there.
Although, what role does OpenSSL play? Because you sure aren't securing that VNC connection with it.
No, I think it's used for network booting. For loading an OS over the network.
Got it. Okay.
There's also you can also ping websites from Tianocore. Yes, it does have a ping command.
Great. Okay. Ping.
It has a network stack.
Yeah.
Yeah, it has a whole network stack.
Yeah. Cool.
And it kind of needs to if you want to enable things which go beyond maybe TFTP booting. Yeah. So if you want to have nice things like here's a HTTP or maybe even HTTPS URL, please boot from that. Then, yeah,
so that said,
the IP stack with TLS client.
Is anyone present uniquely positioned to help look at getting that updated or funding that for being updated? And looking at you, viewers, chime on in.
Let me try compiling it right now. Just right now
Okay, cool.
compiling the latest release.
Great. That's a great step one. Thank you. Let's revisit that as needed. Oop. And just this week, Dave C. was like, hey, what's the state of ARM64? I've got a new machine to try. And a little birdie told me that there might be an Ampere Ultra headed my way. Let me know if you need a FedEx label. That's certainly worth testing to see if things like the 16 vCPU limit has been removed, if there's any notion of PCI pass-through. That just takes getting one's feet wet and exploring that. But broadly, there is very much interest in ARM64. And no, I can't get my ThinkPad Snapdragon to get beyond a mount root prompt. I'm kind of miffed. Although, speaking of 64, a cute little Raspberry Pi 500 landed the other day, and supposedly a 4 image may just boot up. It's downloaded, but I need to just take a few minutes to do that. Yes, Jan.
The Raspberry Pi 3B and 4, they are just cursed platforms when it comes to virtualization. The CPU is capable, but the chipset is not, basically. And so they're stuck between generations. They have the old interrupt controller. They have brought the only ARM64 CPUs you can find in a single board computer without hardware encryption instructions. So yeah, it's very much minimal configuration, initial 64-bit ARM core with mostly unchanged peripherals.
Okay, well, picking up where Emil dropped off, he had to leave. Along the lines of BERT-IOFS was BERT-IO VSOC, and that was in a recent FreeBSD report. This is a tree regarding that. I guess you have to know where to look, but I think that's also just a client for FreeBSD, which naturally to have it as a first-ish class client on cloud providers is a good thing. In his limited free time. That's a theme of the millennium. I hear you. I hear you. Okay. Hans, if you're still here, we got a very brief, vague response from Vitaly on that. Can you remind at least me where the heck we left off on paravirtualized time counter work? Vitaly had done some original work, and I had you take a peek at it. Yes, sir.
Kind of like that, yes. I never really looked much at his code. He had something sometime in fall 2022, which I believe worked on AMD and not much else. And
I thought it blew up on AMD. I gave it a go, and it had some benefits on Intel, and mine panicked.
I don't recall.
Okay.
And he said he wanted to do it. I was saying, okay, if he's got code to review, I'll review it. But not much has happened since then.
Got it. Okay. I'll do a quick little prompt there. Hans, did you take a peek at CBIOS for what it's worth? There is the Zen port for FreeBSD. So it's in the ports tree, kind of like the TPM firmware image just magically showed up. So to what degree that can be bolted in is curious. And wow, we've been... Go ahead.
It's going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, that's not a 14.3 thing.
Yeah, it's probably not something that you just drop in and it suddenly works.
Although your TPM path was a lot shorter than expected.
I've heard that you're gonna have to virtualize, or not virtualize, emulate 16-bit CPU stuff for BIOS.
Interesting. Would 16-bit
do that already?
16-bit CPU, not 16 CPU.
Oh, 16. My
yeah.
Blah blah blah. Sorry about
that's
that.
Where some hypervisor escapes.
Sorry, guys. Anyone from Intel or AMD that they're going to drop that support. I mean, even the real mode's still there as far as I know. And if it's not, it's still there anyway.
So if you have unrestricted guest mode support and nested page table support, it should be really completely in hardware. What may happen is that you have to emulate a few I/O instructions and so on, like I/O port writes, because the hardware emulation of that. Sorry?
Let Hans have the floor. He's our expert here. Go ahead, Hans.
I'm pretty sure the x86 CPU manufactured in the last 10 years has those features that it just works.
Yes,
and I actually
exactly.
Requires those features to work even now already.
I think everything after Nehalem or Westmere has that on Intel, and
Nehalem, that was in 2010.
Yeah, exactly. It's like 2011 or something.
Yeah, so really, it's not an issue with the hardware support. As far as I know, bhyve needs these features anyway, so it doesn't run on CPUs that are too old for that.
Noted. Thank you. And we've asked a million times collectively about libvdsk for native BMDK and QCOW2 support, and UPB has not been very responsive. Bummer. Check a recent call, perhaps it was last week, with a lovely, maybe 2 weeks back, a lovely real-world CUDA update. And a key point was that you really need your versions of drivers, etc., all in sync. I don't know if anyone wants to adopt that challenge, but there's a narrative that FreeBSD has 0 CUDA support, and someone demonstrated CUDA support. So there you have it. There were related issues like some of the ports are not built with CUDA support based on the narrative that there is no support, but that needs 1, documentation, 2, perhaps metaports and other help to make it easy. But the fundamental work is to some degree done. Other wish list items concerns things that we've all completely forgotten about in tracking where we want to be with bhyve on its various platforms. Looking at you, Daniel and Richard, and going around the room.
So what I would like to see
CUDA,
is
awesome.
Sorry.
No, I'm just saying from the chat there. Yeah. Thumbs up. Go ahead, Jan. What you got?
What I would like to see is a little love for vidIO SCSI so that you get hot plug events for adding and removing disks. You can hot insert and remove disks on your virtual host bus adapter, but it doesn't generate the necessary hot plug event so that the guest doesn't see it immediately. So you will either find it when an error condition is handled by rescanning the bus, or if you do a manual rescan. Same for disk resizing. That would just be quite nice, because it's the hard part, just making disk insertions work and disk removals work is done implicitly by vidIO SCSI using the CUM target layer. What's missing is just producing this little event message in the right place, telling you, hey, I've done it, it's there, please scan it, enumerate this device.
The developer in Alaska was working on that from like, what, a solid year ago or more? What was his name?
And for someone like Alexander Martin or someone who's deeply familiar with the CUM target layer, it's probably pretty easy to add. For someone who would have to dig through all the code base to locate the place, just instead of just knowing where it makes sense to look, it would be a lot of work.
So very much someone was working on this. Let me try to think. Gosh, I'll look that up. But thank you for that nudge. You are correct.
Dirty workaround is to use something like a QEMU host agent or something to insert a command afterward and run it. Yeah, but It requires guest customization to
Yep.
notify the guest. A really, really dirty way would be to insert an error report the guest handles by rescanning the bus, so that you inject the fault.
Okay. Okay.
That would be not the right way to handle it, because you shouldn't have to rely on the guest rescanning if it sees this fault condition.
Cool.
I don't know if it's relevant to us or not, but since we're talking about CUDA,
Yes.
it's probably worth noting that on the most recent generation, they have dropped support for CUDA 32-bit.
Oh, good to know, Andrew.
This has come up in that it also, on the gaming side, the only reason I know about it, on the gaming side, it affects PhysX support, which doesn't work on 50
how's that spelled?
generation GPUs.
How's PhysX spelled?
Huh?
You mentioned PhysX?
Yes, that's it.
Okay.
I believe.
Yep, thank you. Oh, and yes, Jan made a point that, well, FreeBSD 15 is pretty firmly threatening to remove support for 32-bit Intel.
It has announced that 32-bit kernels are no longer supported. 32-bit userland is.
Well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about use of 32-bit CUDA commands.
Yep.
Okay.
But
what's the story in
this is a problem
illumos
for
land? Are they still sticking to 32-bit? In illumos land, Andrew, are they sticking with 32-bit? Or is it long gone? I don't know.
I don't remember. I don't have. I mean,
Hans, you had an answer?
like I said, this is not having to do with the bittedness of binaries. That's not what we're talking about here.
Fair enough, but they're all related in some way. So, Richard's being an awesome fly on the wall. Yes, Jan?
So this is an issue for someone wanting to keep playing old games with the latest drivers on Windows. Because the physics acceleration...
It creates a performance issue under certain circumstances. But I imagine that if someone had some kind of other CUDA workload that used the 32-bit CUDA instructions, they could have a problem.
Are there any advantages from doing that? Like smaller pointer sizes or something which gives you better cache utilization, or what?
Not having to rebuild your software.
Okay, sure.
I mean,
but not on this call. So that
I'm not an expert enough in CUDA to answer that question.
I was really impressed by this disgusting, crazy, clever hack of libc6, which does an LD preload attack on Linux libraries, so that you can runtime link Linux libraries into FreeBSD ABI processes, and create a weird chimera which works for CUDA, so that you can use the user space Linux drivers in a FreeBSD process without running it under the FreeBSD Linux ABI compatibility.
You have a link for that? Where's your link?
Yeah, it was in the libc6. It came up in the minutes.
Okay.
Scroll for it.
Actually, getting a little more on topic, from a conversation yesterday, there is, let's see, vGPU unlock that I'll drop a link in the chat. That's for those with, say, GPUs intended for pluralization on servers. Looking at you, Ev, I think I gave you some. And then RDP wrap, nifty ways to allow for multiple RDP connections that might be GPU accelerated. I maybe should put these links here also. Apparently the gaming-oriented services of the world aren't great for CAD development, but suddenly an RDP connection that's GPU accelerated on a virtual machine that's on-prem might be a solution for, say, some folks I know. Anyone who's I'll put in to whom it may concern. To whom it may concern. If these are to get bhyve support and love, etc. Copy link. Did I do the same link twice? Oh, you got the shim. Thank you for that link. And it's not clear if RDP wrap is working on Windows 11. That's getting a little off topic, but it actually flips right back to GPU pass-through on bhyve, on illumos and FreeBSD. Here is the, what do you call it? libc6 shim. Let's see, libc6 shim. Here's a link. Shim.
It kind of allows you to use the user space library drivers, driver libraries for Linux with a FreeBSD executable, so that you can use CUDA. It's really, yeah, it's a hack.
Well, let's take a look. A shim library with glibc ABI compatibility on top of FreeBSD libc. And again, you said not Linux compat, but its own little.
Yeah, it's not the
name
kernel level ABI translation, because that would be process scoped so that you could run a Linux executable in the compat environment and so on. No, this is running a FreeBSD process with the FreeBSD ABI, but linking in a Linux library in such a way that the code in the Linux library has a convincing enough impression of running under Linux to work for the, among others, user space side of the NVIDIA GPU drivers. And that allows you to make use of CUDA, which again proves that there's nothing really missing in FreeBSD to run CUDA. It's that NVIDIA doesn't care to add it because there is no market for them. So if it works with such a hack, it can't be hard for NVIDIA to turn it on.
So that's purely
It's just that they don't see a
specific?
return of investment in doing it.
Okay. Does this broadly help further running Linux applications on FreeBSD?
No, it allows running FreeBSD applications on FreeBSD, but making use of features only found in the Linux drivers for the GPU.
Thank you for clarifying.
So that you can, so you can run you can build something like I don't know, Handbrake, and now use certain features, basically use CUDA transcoding functionality.
Interesting.
But I don't know how reliable it is. And how
there's also all the
maintainable
LLM stuff too that is a requirement for CUDA, like Olama and various other. Yeah.
And even if you have like a Vulkan compute path, it's often slower than the CUDA one on the same hardware.
That was OLM requirements, Olama?
Olama.
Oh.
All right.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Wait a minute.
Also, various HPC workloads, like anything that basically goes on in high performance computing, which cannot run on the AMD GPUs, is generally going to need CUDA as well. So that would open up like a huge area of various industries for FreeBSD to start, working in.
But again, it can be made to work. I would be very skeptical if this is stable enough to use in industry. Well, it's a neat hack.
Give it a go.
It's really
Olama, thank you. I am pleased to have say I've never heard of Olama. Let's take a look. What you got?
That's the local LLM that I'm running.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
If you want to run something like a distilled DeepSeek on your workstation.
Cool. Taking a peek. And again, with so many things like, 90-something% working. Let's work on a little further. So what OS are you running that under, if I may have one of these three?
Presently on Linux at the moment.
Okay, cool. That's a simple interface. Nice. Well, very cool. Any other topics, questions, ideas? Daniel, are you running bhyve in production, or you're just bhyve adjacent?
I've actually run bhyve in production. I actually I think my very first support question for bhyve, I wouldn't mind revisiting for just I think we can do it in 2 minutes.
Yes.
So headroom on Arc. So what I've tinkered with a lot of the with a lot of the sys controls or sysctls about max arc, and the thing is, what I always want is exactly enough headroom to start my biggest VM. I pretty much always want exactly that amount of headroom on my hosts. So I was wondering if anything in the last, I probably asked this question first in 2019, if there's any smart way to just leave a little headroom so there's no risk of out of memory. Because basically I want ZFS to be as greedy as possible, but leave just that last, X times my biggest VM open in case I have to restart one or something like that. And there's no risk of out of memory, because I do, even still within the last 6 months, I've run aground 1 or 2 times. Because you start a 16 gig plus VM and you have 2 left, and bhyve isn't smart enough to say, no, give me just a second, Arc, to get that together for you.
It kind of is, but the way it does is very annoying and feels like it doesn't, because it just does it and then triggers the back pressure mechanism, and that in turn causes ZFS to shrink the arc, and then the arc being shrunk down means you're now basically throttling everything else because you're waiting for some IO dependency while all the dirty buffers are flushed to disk.
So it technically works. It just doesn't actually work.
In practice,
the system freezes for like 10 to 30 seconds. And then it runs again.
There are headroom tunables, I think. But I don't think I ever got them to work exactly. There's like one you have to do like a block translation to set. I forget exactly which one it was. Unfortunately, I'm not at my desk right now, so I can't pretend to know exactly what it is. But yeah, I mean, I've written scripts to just sort of shuffle and deal with it on the boxes that it becomes a concern. But yeah, I haven't found because max arc, that's great, but if the host is eating up, it doesn't adjust to the host's pressure. So if I become more jail heavy, then then I want to drop the max arc. If I'm more VM heavy,
No, I would say what you actually want is not that. You kind of want let's say, a quality of service where allocation. So not
right, and that's what Arc intended to do for the last 15 years. I mean, it insisted on all your FreeBSD memory minus 1 GB. Why? Because it wants to adjust and use the most possible that it can. But the most possible could be 16 gigs less than, for me, might be 16 gigs less than my max at the host. And there's no way to just say, leave 16 or leave 4 or leave 2 even.
Because you shouldn't have to.
But it doesn't work. if you run a VM,
yeah, you can say you shouldn't have to all you want, but the reality is if it's not working, it's not working.
If you start a VM, one of your jails dies. It's not the best.
Wait, if in that case, okay, if it dies, then you have really run it out of memory. But
well,
I mean, even if you have swap available,
if I have 200 gigs free, and I kill a jail because I started a big VM, there's, I feel like that's not so friendly to newbies, and it confused me in 2019, and it happened to me in 2024. So I don't know what to tell you.
What I mean is, what you will see even long before you reach a point where any process dies because the out of memory killer gets a bit antsy. But long before that, you have this situation where the system basically hangs while it frees up the memory by flushing dirty buffers to disk.
So besides a monitor that adjusts the max arc, what's a good solution to that? And if it's to run a script that adjusts the max arc, that's okay.
Have you done that? Because I'm thinking that is plausible. And the moment we got the shrinkable arc, well, you just start somewhat logically saying, how much memory do we have free? How much do we need? Drop it down, check again, keep trying that, then warn the user if I can't figure this out, do it manually.
Yeah.
What we are missing is not the ability to shrink the arc, but to shrink the arc without impacting the quality of service. As in, I want to have a reservation, and it's okay if it takes a bit longer. Don't stall out any running process to do it. Just please do it at a reasonable rate. It's not
okay. I see what you're. I see what you're. Yeah, I see what you're saying. So you think that there's kernel work being done here that could be done in a more clever way, and then that would solve my problem, and I can say arc go nuts and everything would be fine. But whose job is that?
My understanding is that the problem is that bhyve and other virtual machine monitors, it could be VirtualBox as well, do a giant malloc, which is pretty much unreasonable in other conditions, where it says, okay, I need 64 gigs of heap now. Give it to me, especially when you want to pin that down for a virtual machine with PCI Pass-Through. Basically, you're saying, I need 64 gigs of physical memory now as one operation. Whereas the back pressure mechanism only works well if you do it incrementally, like allocate a few dozen megabytes here, a few kilobytes there, and so on. And then the back pressure works as intended if you do it little by little.
Right, and I mean, so maybe other OSs do.
Go ahead, let him finish his crazy idea. Yeah, Jan?
Oh, sorry.
What you could do is, what I try to write is a little hyperdaemon where you basically put in a reservation and it will shrink the arc a bit and then wait until it has shrunk and shrink it a bit again and so on, so that you don't have this giant flush. That would work. Or you could just ask for a bunch of address space and then incrementally fill that up with wired memory. So that you wait for it basically to stable instead of doing it in one big drop. But that's kind of intentionally behaving in such a way that you don't trigger the pathological case, not solving the pathological case. The problem with the interface to the arc size limit as basically means that, first of all, you have to know the sum because you can only read or write that number. You can't apply an offset to it. So there's no atomic read modify write for sysctls.
Right.
And then there is no stable mutex-like thing where you can have a reservation which dies with a process. If you had a trusted helper daemon which would manage basically computing while running some of all active reservations and releasing a reservation when, let's say, a socket gets closed or something. That would kind of work, but it would be avoiding running into the issue, not solving the root cause.
I mean,
writing
that's
such a
easy.
helper, it would work.
Yeah, that's easy math, but is there any downsides to constantly slightly nudging the arc up and down throughout the day, every day, all the
Well,
time?
you would only do it when you start a big VM. You put in a
Right,
reservation
that's right. I would say only if there's, only if there's a change by, only if there's this much starved, then I give
and you
I give
could
it a little
make
nudge.
the reservation kind of linger for, let's say, 30 seconds or so, that if you just restart the VM, it still has basically unclaimed reserved space or something like that. So again, it would be so avoiding running into that issue. It wouldn't be we solve the root cause of this problematic behavior.
That's interesting. I could put that in my VM start script and just
Yes,
say,
exactly. That's the
wait
idea.
until,
And then if
right.
your helper client to that daemon is a chain loader like sudo, it could inherit the connected socket to the bhyve process. So the bhyve process dies, the socket gets closed, and it could even apply capsicum to it so that you can only close it by using cap right in it and set limits and so on, so that the
This would be a
bhyve
nice
process which gets this socket can't do anything with it, like change a reservation or something. It can only keep a reference to it, and when it dies, it dies. And thereby the kernel garbage collects the file descriptor reference. It's the last one, so the socket gets closed, and then the other side of the socket is notified, because it would be a Unix socket, immediately that, hey, your connection has been terminated, you can release this reservation. So yeah, you could do it like that. It would be a bit.
I think that would be a really nice PR for VM bhyve, just to check headroom first, and it doesn't have to be a default. It could be a tunable, but that would be really nice. Just we're starting a X gigabyte VM, check to make sure Y is available. If not, bump the arc and wait.
Yeah,
and I think that would be really great.
The other way, if you don't want to repeatedly poke the arc size limitation, would be you could, if you have the permission to do it, do incremental mallocs with mlock, so that you wire down that allocation every time you do it. I don't know if you would have to write it for the mlock memory to actually be triggered, but you shouldn't have to. When you do it with mlock, and then you don't have to bump the arc until you've unblocked all of it and freed the allocation, whereby you've kind of allocated it and made it available. And now, once you've made it available, you bump the arc to what should suddenly be available. Maybe that's more pleasant from the observable behavior, but I haven't tested that. It would be, a bit like treating the kernel as a black box when we have the source code.
I was about to ask, do you have the code linked to that back pressure mechanism, just to see how smart or not so smart it is?
Well, you would have to look up where in under sources, contrib, OpenCFS, somewhere there is.
Right, somewhere there, okay.
So it would have to be in the FreeBSD specific parts of bhyve, would have to be the calls side, which calls the arc back pressure, shrink it down, something.
Yeah.
Well, this is a nice improvement to my management. Thanks for talking that through with me.
I wanted to write is a daemon which uses KQ to observe a directory, and you would put in a sparse file, an empty one. You just f-truncate it to the reservation size, and if you lock it, it's an active reservation. You can use KQ file monitoring for that. And then the other process would get notified when you unlock it, because, yeah.
I don't know how big a drop you've done, but a few years back, I found that on my 128 gig workstation, I was completely out of memory because the ARC just automatically gobbled it up. I dropped 100 gig. It took maybe a minute or two, and I thought the machine was frozen, but it did it. I was blown away. Of course, if you've got a bunch of jails running, etc., your services will probably come to a halt. However, the darn thing worked.
Yep, exactly. You're not going to crash anything by doing that, but because of the dependencies on I/O, which is blocked behind the flushes, the system will effectively come to a halt, and ever more threads will be blocking while the arc is shrinking, and then they unlock again.
So what I'm trying to say there is that a notion of using baby steps is probably reasonable. And if a VM that wants, say, 8 gigs of memory needs to just gently have a fake helper utility poke with requests until it has leg room, well, maybe that's the answer. And it's a classic, almost the first way to burn yourself on any meaningful bhyve use is to just burn your VMs bumping into your ARC and everything exploding and sad face. So it's not yet a solved problem. Let's look at every opportunity to solve it. Yes, Jan.
And one thing which may have would be if bhyve would do direct I/O on the VDEVs. Because that would make basically uncached, and that way you wouldn't have to set the primary cache to metadata only. Maybe it already does that now these days. I haven't checked, but it would also mean, or at least make that. I think for the file backend, you can actually do that to set that to direct. Check that.
Oh, while you check
that,
anything else?
An option on the block device. You can open the file with nocache is what it's called. Direct is a bit confusing because direct is not direct I/O, but it's an alias for osync. So all the writes, every write is an implicit fsync.
Could you drop the syntax in the chat or a link to it?
It's in the main page.
In the manual page, okay. Of Zvol or what?
No, of bhyve.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, no, the.
They're a bit confusingly connected. So basically, nocache disables the read caching, and direct effectively disables the write caching. But for avoiding blowing double caching, it's probably enough to set the nocache. Whereas, the direct setting would still allow read caching. If you only open a file with osync, it doesn't prevent, or a device, it doesn't prevent CFS from caching it, which would then result in one cache on the host and another one inside the virtual machine.
Well, I need to head out.
So, cool. Take care. Enjoy. Block device options. I'll drop these in the chat from the manual page. Or not in the chat, in the document. Thank you for that. Take care, Andrew. There are the block device options.
So
I confess I've not tinkered with. Bad, Michael.
The downside is that while nocache prevents the double caching, it also prevents reasonable amounts of write caching, which is oftentimes useful. So you don't want to waste gigabytes of memory double caching stuff, but you probably want to dedicate maybe a gigabyte as a write buffer so that you have effectively the equivalent of a disk with a write back buffer.
So no cache is truly no caching read or write? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Or
no.
you do get.
It opens a file with O direct, whatever that means for that file and file system.
There you
Not
go.
all file systems support it. Some may, especially on other operating systems, some may just say, oh, it's not supported, fail to open the file in that way, or they may just ignore it.
Okay.
On Linux, it's completely inconsistent. At least it used to be a while back. I haven't checked in a long time.
Okay, we are down to Hans, Alexei, Richard, and Jan. Anything else at this time? That was a fantastic discussion. I appreciate that. Oh, let's call it. I will be around a few minutes. Does anyone want the honors?
Oh, like and subscribe.
Thank you very much. Have a great one, everyone. Take care. Ciao.